What do you do when you're exhausted or overwhelmed? How do you keep going?
We all have moments where we feel that way. It could be a week, a day, a month, a year. Um, my biggest encouragement is give yourself some grace. Adjust your expectations during some of those really intense seasons. Just be reminded that you're not failing, and we need to be remembering that it's progress over perfection.
Well, welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive in your homeschool journey. Today, once again, I have the pleasure and privilege to have Nancy Manos with me. Last week, we did a Q&A session. Nancy did some deep diving to find out the trending questions for homeschool moms and dads. So we answered the first 3 of 6 last week, and we'll be here now answering the last 3 questions. So we think you'll really enjoy this. Nancy has so much experience in homeschooling, homeschooled her girls through high school, and has been really involved in the homeschooling community most of her adult life. So stay tuned. We think you're really going to be encouraged. This podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for coming back again for part 2 of our trending questions. For those who weren't here last week, why don't you share one more time what you found when you started doing your deep dive into the question homeschool moms are asking?
Well, I was so fascinated to find that the questions moms and dads are asking today are the same questions that we have been answering and asking ourselves for the past 20 and 30 years. Nothing is really new under the sun. And so it's really just a reminder that we all kind of have the same concerns, the same challenges, the same desire to raise and educate our children with excellence.
Well, Nancy, our first question for today is this one. Can you homeschool while working, and how do you balance it all?
This question is asked a lot. I see it in some Facebook groups quite often, where both mom and dad have to work, or maybe it's a single parent family. And whether it's full time or part time, it really is becoming much more common than when we were homeschooling to have to work. Now, we both did work, although mine was unpaid volunteer work, but I juggled a lot as well. So it's really, I hope this is encouraging to parents to know that you can do both. The one thing I always land on, though, is that you want to do a good job for your employer and you want to do a good job for your children. And so we're going to talk about some ways to make that happen.
One of the thing for me is I did not work well, I take that back. A lot of my work was like Nancy, it was just volunteer in the home. It was not just, it was volunteering in the homeschool space. And we were lobbying for good homeschool laws in South Carolina. So that was really the first 7 or 8 years of our homeschooling experience. Then I ran a homeschooling organization, and we had an office, but I worked mainly from home. And I've worked for publishers. I worked for a publisher in Nashville when Lizzie was in high school. So that was my first real job outside of the homeschool landscape, although it was to develop a homeschool product line for B&H Publishing. And so I just want to encourage people, if you're working from home, it's a little bit easier just because you're all together. The things that my friends found hard, especially those that are working home today, is that they say it would be easier if they left 3 hours a day rather than tried to work at home. And so there's some of my friends who have actually had a mommy's helper or brought in childcare for 3 hours a day or 3 hours 2 times a week, or had a grandparent come and stay in the house while they worked a few hours a day. So there are all kinds of ways you can work that. And Nancy, you and I are talking, you might want to talk about this. There are a lot of people who do a lot of work late afternoon and evenings because our kids aren't tied to that same schedule.
Well, and think about this. Even in high school, it didn't take us that long to get our schoolwork done, and then the kids could work independently on other things.
That's right.
But if we were done by lunch, that gave me the whole afternoon and into the evening, some evenings if we didn't have family or church things. Um, so look at your schedule, the pieces of your day that can be structured in a way to give you some good time with your kids. Maybe start the morning at the table and go over their, core subjects or things that they need you for, and then turn them loose with some independent work, whether it's with video courses or they're old enough and independent enough to work on their own. I remember, so I was volunteering for our children's ministry at church, and I went to check email. I was also volunteering in the homeschool world. And I went to check email, and I came back, and Alex, poor little sweet Alex, our youngest daughter, she goes, I said when I left, I said, "I'll be back in 5 minutes. I just need to go check an email and respond." And I came back like a half hour later. She goes, when she was older, she told me, "Mom, I used to think 5 minutes was a really long time." 'Cause you would say you'd be gone for 5 minutes, and then it was, a half
Yes,
hour or an
yes.
hour later. So, it's really funny the things that they remember. But I think there are ways we can adapt and put some systems and rhythms in place that let us manage both.
And, you hear a lot about take your daughter to work day or take your son to work day. I had a lot of friends who actually, especially if they just had one child, would take that child to work and they had a desk in the office. Now, this is obviously when they were older, and that worked for them. So I had a lot of friends who were nurses and one friend who was a doctor, and they did a lot of night shift work. They would go into work at 5 when their husband got home and work till 1 or 2 in the morning. Some of them worked from 11 to 7, which is really tough, and some of in the medical field, a lot of people can work 2 weekend shifts and be paid for 40 hours a week, and so I think homeschooling moms are very creative in figuring out how to work, how to do what they need to do, to contribute to the household finances if they need to, but then also how to make sure their children get a lot of special time from them.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think there are ways, like you said, grandparents, your spouse, extended family, friends. You can put together a network of people that will support you and that that make it possible. We're not alone. And I think like being isolated sometimes makes us feel like it's all on my shoulders. I have to figure it out myself. But God has put us in families and community. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I think people quit homeschooling not because they can't figure out how to homeschool. They quit homeschooling because they can't figure out how to homeschool and do everything else. Cook dinner, get the laundry done, clean the house, get the kids to their extracurricular activities, all of it. It's a lot. And if you're working also. And so just finding some systems and rhythms that help you get your work done, give you time to do what you need to do. So one idea is maybe it's Saturday is science day. So all of your assignments for the week, you do them all, or history day. You don't have to do a little bit each day. You could do kind of a bulk thing, and maybe that's you're working and your husband does science with them on Saturday. So there's lots of ways. And I think as believers, we are children of the creator of the universe. And the creative one lives inside of us, and he can certainly give us some creative ideas.
That's exactly right. So we just want to encourage you. I just love what Nancy said about we don't have to do this alone. So have your community. I remember one time when I guess the boys were probably 11 and 9, and Lizzie was a toddler, so she was about 2. Joe was traveling. I was real involved legislatively in South Carolina, not because that was my first choice, but we had so many legislative issues and court cases and all of that. And I just sat down with Joe one night and I said, I just don't think I can keep doing this. I've got too many balls in the air. And so he sat down and we just prayed together. And 2 days later, one of my dearest friends, Donna Allen, called and said, saying, Christy, Christy, her daughter, which I knew well, had just graduated from high school and wasn't sure what she wanted to do yet. I mean, now she's got a great career, but many years later, but she was just out of high school. Would you like a mommy's helper for a couple of days a week? And Joe was really funny. I mean, Christy charged us such a reasonable amount, but he said, we'll fast one day a week or one night a week for supper if this gives us, what you need to do that. But Christy, I think she worked for me for like $5 an hour. And it was just so nice. She came in while I was teaching the boys. Sometimes she'd just take Lizzie for a walk. Or if I needed to go to the state house, I could take two children instead of three. Or, it was that community that really surrounded me at that time that, besides God, I mean, it was the saving grace that God gave me. And my parents and Joe's parents, I really love the fact that you chose to talk about that because it's so important.
Oh, yeah, we need the grandparents, and we moved away from our family, but they would come visit. And I think there's creative solutions. And maybe do you make enough that you could hire a cleaning person once a month to, like, deep clean the house? Or maybe it like you're saying, a mother's helper, the teenage daughter of a homeschool family that you know, that could come in and just help you keep up on things so that you can give your children the attention they deserve while also taking care of your work. So, I think there's Facebook groups for working homeschool moms. Chia of California hosts one for I think it's called Working Homeschool Moms. So talk to other moms and find out what are they doing. I think there's lots of encouragement and support.
To do that. Okay, this is question number 5 in our top 6 questions that are trending from homeschool moms. What do you do when you're exhausted or overwhelmed? How do you keep going?
We all have moments where we feel that way. It could be a week, a day, a month, a year. Um, my biggest encouragement is give yourself some grace. Adjust your expectations during some of those really intense seasons. I mean, it could be more than exhaustion and overwhelm. It could be a health issue. It could be you have a new baby and you have a bunch of kids and you're trying to keep homeschooling going. Um, Whatever the season, or maybe you're caring for an aging parent. Um, so some of those seasons are you're in survival mode. And just be reminded that you're not failing, and we need to be remembering that it's progress over perfection. Like, we're not trying to live this, fairy tale, everything's perfect, sunshine and rainbows. The children are all obedient and willing to do school every day, and your house is immaculate. Like, that's not real life.
That
We
that's exactly right. That's
we need a little
exactly right.
reality check. And adjusting our expectations, I think, is another thing that we can do. If you're feeling like I cannot go on, I'm just fried, maybe it's go outside. Like, I think that is a huge tip that has helped so many families. If you're not following Ginny Urich and 1,000 Hours Outside, I would encourage you to do so because she's got some great pointers, and inspiration for getting outside. So what do you say, Zan? What are some ways that moms can take care of themselves?
I think part of the answer is what we just talked about with working moms. You've got to figure out what you can delegate and what you can't. And there are some things that you really can delegate. I mean, we cannot delegate. There's a passage in Exodus that I love, and it's after Moses has just I mean, God has freed the Israelites from slavery, and Moses has led the people back to the wilderness, and they're going to have a time of worship, and his father-in-law brings his wife and grandkids back. And so his father-in-law is watching Moses do what he does. And he says, Moses, what are you doing? And he said, well, from morning to night, I stand and I judge the people. And and his father-in-law says to him, he says, Moses, you can't keep doing this because neither you nor the people can handle this. And he said, find men, you have groups of tens or fifties, hundreds, thousands that you trust that are reliable and delegate some of this load to them. And if you think this is from God, if you do that, then you and your people will be happy. And so I just think, and I'm beginning to wonder, was that in Numbers or was that in Exodus? I think it was in Numbers. So anyway, but I think the point is we really do need to be smart. Examine the breaking points for you if you're overwhelmed. What is that point that is causing you the most consternation? And if that's not something you can delegate, then look for other pieces of the puzzle that you can.
It's so true. Think about those things even in your physical space that are draining your energy. If everybody dumps their stuff on the kitchen island, does that push you over the edge? Or the pile of shoes by the front door or whatever? Like, are there things that are driving you nuts that you could put a system in place to kind of resolve and alleviate that stress? And then, I would say look for ways that you can have some fun, because sometimes we get so focused on finishing our schoolwork for the day that we forget, like, "Okay, let's play a card game or a board game, or let's go to the park, or let's watch a movie, or let's bake something together." Like, there's so many ways to kinda decompress and have fun together. The homeschool journey should not be drudgery. Sometimes it's hard work, but it shouldn't be miserable for
You
you or
know,
your kids.
that is such a word well spoken, and I think along those lines, we want our kids not to just be motivated in their schoolwork, we want them to be motivated in life, and I think one of those the ways we do that is to give them things to look forward to. For instance, Wednesday for us was service day. I mean, we had a couple of hours of school. Some days we didn't. Some days we worked in, an inner city where the boys tutored after school, so that was in the afternoon. They worked in different ministries with our parents to the elderly and to the poor and disadvantaged. I mean, Wednesdays was just our day, to give back to others, and what I didn't realize at the time is that was sort of a rallying cry for Monday and Tuesday. We needed to get all of our work done on Monday and Tuesday because Wednesday was our day out. It was something to look forward to. They loved the people we were working with. They loved the things we were doing, but they also that was like this little deadline where they needed to get some things done. And then the other thing I suggest is don't be afraid to take field trips. You were talking about having fun. And Nancy, you and I did this little ebook together when homeschooling is hard. And in that you can get from my website, zantyler.com, you can go there and download it. We talk about interviewing your children for field trip ideas. Ask them at the beginning of the school year if if there was some place you wanted to visit, what would it be? If there was a field trip you wanted to take, well, if you wanted to see somebody or if you wanted to see something in nature, a park or the beach or the mountains, what would it be? And then on those days when you wake up and you just know this is going to be a terrible school day and we all need a break, then you've got some things with redemptive value that you can do. You just take out your sheet and say, what of these things are we going to do today?
It's so good. There's so many great ideas, and we will not get into AI today, but, you can ask ChatGPT or Claude or any of those chatbots that have internet connection, what's happening. It can even be like, what free things are happening this month in my town, for ages X to Y, and then collect ideas of things happening in your area that you might add to your schedule to give you something to look forward to. I love
That
that.
yeah, that is a great idea. Well, this is a question that Nancy and I really feel like we could just spend an hour talking about because it's so important, but we're gonna move to our final question in this two-part series, and it is, how will homeschooling impact high school transcripts and college admissions? And so there's so many different ways to look at homeschooling in high school, and I'm just gonna let Nancy start with what she did with her girls.
Well, I think this is one of the biggest concerns that parents have. If you have a 5-year-old, you're concerned about will they get into college. And, um, I know you're gonna share about this, but colleges want homeschooled kids, and I know you'll talk about why. So, for my girls, though, by the time they were 14, 15, I really had a strong idea that they were not headed to college, and so, true confession, I never even created a high school transcript for them, which feels like, a huge failure, but, I could have. I saved the records, but they both went on to become, just in whatever field they were in, whatever job they had in their volunteer work, super skilled, very creative. It's
Articulate, amazing young
they are
women.
I have 2 funny stories about that. One, Olivia, our oldest, had the worst handwriting as a kid, and I harped on her about her handwriting so much, and I wish, like, hindsight, I wish I hadn't focused over much on that. As a young adult, she was volunteering in the women's ministry at her church, the church she was at, because when she grew up, she was volunteering at the church where she took dance classes, of all places, but she learned hand lettering, and ended up having an Etsy store where she was paid thousands of dollars to do wedding invitations and Christmas ornaments, and I'm like, "Why did I worry about this so much?"
I know you wanna say to her, "Where were you? Where was this child
Right.
when we were struggling over handwriting?"
I know, it's so crazy, but when they want to learn something,
That's
they
right.
will.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
so yeah, and I can't remember what the other thing you said something that made me think of another story with Alex, and I have forgotten it now.
Well, one thing is that your kids were never trained formally in public speaking, but I
That
know
was
they
the
were
other story.
okay. Oh,
That was the other story. So, this was also with Olivia when she was about 15. I was teaching a workshop at the Arizona Homeschool Convention, and, I had her share for, 7 to 10 minutes about how homeschooling benefited her, what she saw the advantages of homeschooling to be, and there we opened it up for questions at the end, and she just stayed up there with me, and this man raised his hand, and he asked Olivia, "How did you get to be such a good public speaker?" And her response, it filled my heart with pride, but also made me laugh. She goes, "Well, I talk to people." And so just regular life, interacting with people of all ages, she was able to communicate very well.
because our children are exposed when they're homeschooling to
Right.
adults, to all age groups, to so many interesting things in life that you just, I mean, that's pretty amazing. Your
Yeah.
daughters were very
And they
amazing.
help us. Your kids helped you. You did things together. Mine helped volunteer at church and in the homeschool community. And so they're learning skills that they can take into their life, including things like time management and independent study and things like that.
You know, Nancy, that makes me think of one thing I wanted to mention under the last question about being exhausted and overwhelmed. And that is something that Ray Vanderlaan taught me. He was an academician. He was PhD, I think, in Hebrew studies. And he was the head of a Christian school, I believe. I know he taught at one. So books and academics were really important to him. But I heard him speak once, and he said, the books we choose for our children are important, and that is our curriculum, but the interruptions that God brings into our lives and our children's lives is His curriculum. And, I saw that. We would have days and weeks at the State House, and I would come home and go crawl in my little curriculum closet that Joe had built for me. And I would just sit there and weep over workbook pages we missed. And then I have to say later on, I mean, it impacted all three of my children in different ways and gave them different skill sets. And that's a conversation for another day. But John, my middle son, went on to law school, very interested in public policy because all the time he spent at the State House meeting with Mike Ferris in different places, hearing Supreme Court arguments. I mean, what child does that? Homeschool kids do that. And so he later on, I mean, he's an attorney, and for 2.5 years, he became the chief legal counsel for the State Department of Education as a homeschooling dad and as one who had never been in a public school classroom before. And so sometimes I think we need to understand that God also has plans for our children's lives, and He is not going to let those plans be thwarted. He's going to give them the experiences they need, some hard, some pleasant, but He is always advocating for our children.
It's
I just
true. You know, you spent some time talking to college admissions people. What did you learn from talking those conversations?
Nancy, you were so good about getting me back on topic. Thank you. That's what friends are for. That's why we work so well together. Um, one of two, there were 2 or 3 things they said that really surprised me, and I've met with college admissions, counselors now around the country. One of the things they say is that they just love homeschoolers because they come to college campuses with an intellectual vitality they don't see in a lot of other students because they haven't been burned out by this classroom schedule for 12 years. So the second thing they say is they love how independent these kids are in their learning. We talked about that a little bit. But he said these kids know how to take a syllabus, read it, do their work, come to class, give their best efforts. And he said it's amazed us. And then the third thing, which I love the most that a college admissions person told me, was that of all the kids they expected to have their heads in the sand when they came to college, it was homeschool kids. And he said, "But Zan, they're leaders on campus. So they can't figure it out." He said, "But they're leaders. So they're independent learners, they're leaders, and they have an intellectual vitality. What is not to love about that?" And our kids are being recruited. I think the big question now is, are your kids where do you want them to go? There's such a push now for the trades and that might be a 2-year, college degree at a 2-year school. It may be an internship where they go straight there after high school. It may be the military. It may be college, but things are changing, and not every job requires a college degree now that used to. And so I think, you need to look at dual enrollment, as Nancy mentioned earlier. There are so many ways to cut down on the debt that have plagued a lot of kids, getting out of college with $100,000 in debt and they have a fine arts degree. And I mean, I'm not poking fun at a fine arts degree. I know many, many people who have those, but you've just got to weigh the debt against is this gonna work in the best interest of our child? So, there are a lot of things to think about now, in college, and, there are all kinds of ways to get help with your transcripts. I know HSLDA, has high school advisors, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Joe and I started a homeschooling organization in South Carolina. We have a high school program, and, I mean, the parents still do the teaching, but we help them design their transcripts and help them with the college admissions process. So there are all kinds of places. Jean Burke, she's been on the podcast. She has College Prep Genius, and it's really a way to up your child's test scores and help with scholarship money. So there are all kinds of resources now for homeschool kids who want to go to college. And also there's the military, there are the trades, there are lots of different avenues that our kids can take at this point in time.
It's incredible the opportunities, even during high school. Like, I was impressed with the
Yes.
opportunities my girls had for apprenticeships and internships, and I know your kids had those kind of things too. You know, I ran the Arizona homeschool graduation for a few years and was on the committee for a number of years more than that. And we publish a little booklet that has a picture of each graduate and their accomplishments and their future goals. And I think this year they had 217 graduates with 3,400 people came to this cap and gown ceremony. One of my favorite things was, or two of my favorite things. One was the grandparents and relatives that would be like, they didn't know what to expect from a homeschool graduation, but they were like, "This is legit. Like, these kids have done great things and are going great places." But when I would read through, because I would do the graphic design to do the layout for the program, reading their accomplishments, the things they did during their homeschool years, and the goals that they had for the future, it gives me a lot of hope. You know, there's just such a great diversity of children and their interests and their skills and their talents and their passions that God has given them, and it's exciting.
It is exciting, and so I think Nancy and I, our goal for these 6 questions, this two-part episode, has been to encourage you in your homeschooling, to let you know you're not alone. Um, you have the Heavenly Father who is the most perfect superintendent of education. You have a strong community of people who are there to help you. And we hope that these questions have alleviated some of your fears and encouraged you in some very specific and special ways. So, Nancy, thank you so much for your life. Thank you for the way you pour it into other people in so many ways we wouldn't have that would be like answering 10 questions in one here. But thank you for all you do for so many. If people want to get in touch with you, if they want to have you speak, how do they find you?
I have a website, nancymanos.com.
Okay. And as always, you can find me at zantyler.com and on social media. And we just want to thank you for spending your time with us. We pray that it has been a blessing to you and your family. And until next time, bye.